In the town of Elmore, where reality bends without warning, and logic collapses under the weight of its own contradictions, there lives a boy who never stops laughing. His name is Gumball Watterson, and if you look closely, past the chaos and noise, past the disasters he seems to summon just by existing, you'll see that his laughter isn't carelessness. It's philosophy. It's how he survives a world that refuses to make sense. Gumball's life is one long test of adaptability. Every day he wakes up inside a different genre, a different mood, a different version of himself. The world reshuffles its rules, the animation style might change, time might loop, and yet Gumball remains. Not as a hero, not as a prophet, but as something rarer. A child who keeps trying, who keeps talking, who refuses to stop finding humor in the mess. Elmore isn't built to make sense. Its physics are suggestions. Its moral lessons dissolve by the next episode, and every adult seems to be barely holding on. But inside that nonsense, Gumball learns something profoundly human. That you can't control life, only how you meet it. He's not immune to frustration. He cries, yells, panics, but he always circles back to laughter, not the shallow kind that hides pain, but the knowing kind that says, I see it all, and I'm still here. To laugh in a broken world is to declare that you're bigger than your circumstances. Gumball has made that declaration every day of his life. Most characters in stories like his are searching for order. They want destiny, purpose, or closure. Gumball, though, finds peace in the opposite. He makes friends with chaos. He treats accidents like experiments, failures like stories, and pain like setup for a better punchline. Comedy, for him, isn't escape. It's translation. When life speaks in nonsense, laughter is the only language that still works. Every time he slips, stumbles, and embarrasses himself, he turns the fall into performance. It's not self-pity, it's creative control. When he laughs at what breaks him, he reclaims it. And that's what makes Gumball strangely philosophical. He doesn't fight his world's absurdity. He collaborates with it. Every glitch, every mistake, every impossible day becomes a reminder that meaning doesn't have to come from sense. It can come from feeling. He fails tests, ruins plans, forgets promises, but what defines him isn't success or wisdom. It's persistence. He always comes back, not wiser, not improved, but ready to try again. There's a quiet beauty in that. A rhythm of endurance that feels truer than perfection. Elmore mirrors our own world more than we like to admit. It's saturated with screens, arguments, distractions, and contradictions. Everyone talks at once. Everyone believes they're right, and the ground keeps shifting under everyone's feet. Gumball doesn't escape that chaos. He lives inside it and learns to find joy anyway. He makes failure funny, confusion meaningful, and boredom bearable. Through him, the amazing world of Gumball becomes a mirror of modern existence, one that's overstimulated, self-aware, and desperately searching for sincerity. Gumball is the fool who accidentally becomes the philosopher, the one who fails too loudly, feels too much, and yet keeps his heart open. Every story about him is really a test of emotional elasticity. How much chaos can a person endure before they stop laughing? For Gumball, the answer seems to be infinite, because the laughter isn't denial. It's rebellion. It's what happens when you realize the world isn't built to make sense, and you decide to love it anyway. He's a child who meets absurdity with creativity, pain with humor, and consequence with another try. In a sense, Gumball has already survived the end of the world. His town collapses regularly, his reality rewinds, his existence is constantly questioned, and yet the next morning he's back at the breakfast table with the same energy. the same impossible confidence that things will somehow work out. His laughter is the sound of persistence, the quiet belief that meaning can be found even after the world forgets how to hold itself together. If Finn the human represents courage, Gumball represents endurance, the ability to stay yourself when reality itself refuses to stay consistent. There's something both funny and sacred about that. The way he keeps his identity alive through nonsense, the way he finds small joys in constant failure, the way he transforms embarrassment into art. Gumball teaches us that it's okay not to understand life, as long as you keep living it. He doesn't ask for perfection or coherence, he just wants another chance, another day, another laugh. In a world that ends and restarts with every episode, he's proof that persistence is its own kind of immortality. The boy who laughs at the end of the world isn't laughing because he doesn't care. He's laughing because he does. Because somewhere deep down, even amid the noise and the absurdity, he believes the world is still worth smiling at. Failure is the language Gumball Watterson speaks most fluently. It's his native tongue, the rhythm that shapes his everyday. He fails at school, at sports, at plans, at keeping his promises, at saving face. He fails at growing up, at being responsible, at thinking before speaking. In almost any other story, that would make him a cautionary tale, a symbol of immaturity, recklessness, or wasted potential. But in the amazing world of Gumball, failure is not a tragedy. It's a teacher. It's the way Gumball learns to live. His entire philosophy, though he'd never call it that, is built on the idea that it's okay to mess up, as long as you stay honest enough to laugh about it afterward. When you look at Gumball's world, you start to see that failure isn't the exception. It's the pattern. The universe itself is unreliable. Rules break, episodes reset, memories get rewritten. So how could perfection even exist in a place that refuses consistency? Gumball understands this instinctively. His mistakes don't surprise him, they comfort him. Every time he fails, the world seems to say, "You're still part of this story." Because in Elmore, the worst thing you can be is irrelevant, and the surest way to stay visible is to keep making noise, even if that noise is chaos. Gumball's failures aren't evidence of weakness, they're proof of participation. It's easy to see how much his relationship with failure has shaped who he is. As a kid, he doesn't know how to hold back. He acts on emotion, impulse, and curiosity. He overreaches constantly. He thinks he can outsmart the world, fix his mistakes with more mistakes, or charm his way through any disaster. But the real beauty of his story is what happens after the crash. When he stops trying to undo the damage and starts trying to understand it. Time after time, he learns that failure isn't just about doing something wrong. It's about finding out who you are when everything you wanted collapses. He fails at being the smartest, the strongest, the most popular, but he succeeds at being sincere. And in Elmore, that's rarer than perfection. Every failure for Gumball becomes a small mirror of human nature. When he gets jealous, when he lies, when he lets pride ruin something he cares about, the result is always the same. Embarrassment first, reflection second, and laughter third. That cycle, humiliation, realization, humor, is how he grows. Not through discipline or wisdom, but through self-awareness. He's not afraid to see himself at his worst, because he knows that even his flaws have value. The show never punishes him for failing. It only punishes him for refusing to learn. And even then, the lesson is gentle. It resets by the next episode. But somewhere in him, something sticks. A faint imprint of understanding that being human means being wrong, often and loudly. And there's a quiet psychology behind this. Gumball's entire environment, from his family to his school, reinforces the idea that failure is inevitable but survivable. Nicole pushes him to do better. Darwin reminds him to stay kind. Richard reminds him that mistakes don't end the world. Even Anais, with all her logic, can't escape the occasional meltdown. Everyone around Gumball is flawed, inconsistent, and ridiculous, and that means he never has to carry the illusion of perfection alone. In a way, Elmore itself is a place built for trial and error. A sandbox reality where consequences are lessons, not punishments. Gumball's philosophy of failure grows naturally out of that soil. But this doesn't mean he's free of pain. Gumball's failures often hurt him deeply. They embarrass him in front of his peers, alienate the people he loves, and force him to face the parts of himself he'd rather ignore. He's failed Darwin more than once. He's made Nicole cry, broken Anais' trust, and disappointed Penny. And every time, he feels it, the sting of guilt, the weight of regret. Yet what makes him such a compelling character is what he does next. He doesn't wallow. He doesn't deny it. He turns the pain into a story, a lesson, or a joke. And by doing that, he takes back control of it. The moment he can laugh about what hurt him, he's already growing past it. Failure becomes Gumball's form of wisdom, messy, reactive, and improvisational. He learns through contradiction. When he tries to force outcomes, life collapses faster. When he relaxes and admits defeat, things tend to work themselves out. Over time, he begins to understand that there's something liberating about not being good at everything. It makes room for humility, for empathy, for creativity. Because when you stop chasing perfection, you start seeing the value in imperfection, in yourself and in others. Gumball learns to love his family's chaos, his father's laziness, his mother's pressure, even his own short temper. He begins to see that every person's flaws are part of what makes them real. There's an episode called The Failure, where Gumball tries to understand why his life feels like a loop of disasters. By the end, he doesn't fix anything. He doesn't become smarter or more successful, but he accepts that the loop itself is the point. He realizes that life isn't a ladder of improvement. It's a circle of experience. What matters isn't how far you climb, but how you move through the fall. That's the essence of his philosophy. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the process of becoming someone who can survive it. In a world that constantly resets, Gumball has learned that the only lasting growth is emotional. He can't control time, continuity, or logic, but he can control how he treats people, how he forgives himself, and how he keeps laughing even when he doesn't feel like it. That's what makes his failures beautiful. They're not just comic timing, they're small acts of acceptance. Every time he messes up and tries again, he's reminding us that there's nothing shameful about imperfection. That maybe the point of being alive isn't to win, but to play, and to keep playing, no matter how many times you lose. In the end, Gumball's philosophy of failure feels like an antidote to modern anxiety. He shows us that you don't have to be brilliant, composed, or flawless to be meaningful. You just have to care enough to keep trying. You just have to laugh once more than you cry. And maybe that's what wisdom really looks like in a world that keeps breaking. Not knowing the answers, but being brave enough to keep asking the questions. For Gumball Watterson, comedy isn't just entertainment, it's oxygen. It's how he breathes inside a world that constantly tries to smother him with absurdity. Everything in Elmore seems designed to overwhelm the senses. The talking objects, the nonsensical rules, the endless chain of catastrophes that erupt out of nowhere and vanish without explanation. Most people would lose their minds in a world like that. But Gumball has something else. He has humor. And humor for him isn't distraction or denial. It's the tool he uses to stay alive in a reality that refuses to behave. Gumball's laughter isn't shallow, it's instinctual, ancient, and precise. He doesn't laugh because he doesn't care. He laughs because he has to. When everything breaks down, when the plan backfires, when the people around him fall apart, his first response is to joke. That habit might look childish, but it's actually a kind of resilience. It's how he absorbs the chaos instead of being destroyed by it. In psychology, we might call it reappraisal, the ability to reinterpret pain so it stops hurting. In Gumball's world, that's not a luxury. It's a survival skill. Every joke he makes is a small act of defiance against despair. Every laugh is a way of saying, this still belongs to me. Comedy has always been his armor. Whenever he's cornered, by authority, by embarrassment, by fear, his instinct is to make light of it. He cracks a joke, pulls a face, turns the whole scene into performance. It's how he protects his dignity. Because if you can make people laugh at your pain, it stops being humiliation. It becomes art. Gumball doesn't have control over Elmore's physics or over his family's chaos, but he does control the tone. If he can make it funny, then it's no longer tragedy. It's story. That's why even when he's hurt or scared, he never fully surrenders. He rewrites the script in real time, one punchline at a time. That's what separates Gumball from cynicism. His jokes aren't about detachment, they're about connection. He's not mocking the world to stand above it. He's trying to make sense of it alongside everyone else. When Nicole melts down, when Darwin panics, when Richard misunderstands something for the 1,000th time, Gumball steps in with humor, because it's the only language they all share. It breaks tension, it resets the emotional temperature. His comedy is a kind of translation, a bridge between fear and hope. When words fail, laughter still works. And yet, there's a cost. Comedy can comfort, but it can also conceal. There are moments when Gumball hides behind it, when the jokes come too fast, too loud, when he's clearly covering something raw. We see it when he tries too hard to impress Penny, when he's caught lying to Nicole, when he panics after letting Darwin down. The smile cracks, but he keeps performing. That's the danger of using humor as a shield. It starts to separate you from what you actually feel. Gumball has built his whole identity around being funny, but deep down, he fears what happens when the laughter stops. Who is he without the joke? That's a question he rarely dares to face. Still, the show never punishes him for being funny. It treats his comedy as both flaw and gift. Something messy but honest. Because in Elmore, the world doesn't reward stoicism. It rewards creativity. Every absurd situation demands improvisation, and Gumball, more than anyone, knows how to improvise. He can turn disaster into dialogue, insult into irony, fear into slapstick. It's not just instinct, it's adaptation. In a reality that breaks its own logic every 5 minutes, survival belongs to the ones who can turn meaninglessness into play. Comedy isn't Gumball's escape from absurdity, it's his way of mastering it. You can see this especially in his friendship with Darwin. Together, they transform chaos into conversation. Darwin's sincerity grounds Gumball's impulsiveness, while Gumball's humor gives Darwin's kindness an edge of resilience. When they face something unbearable, Gumball cracks the joke and Darwin laughs, not because it's funny, but because it helps. It's how they tell each other, we'll be okay. Their laughter isn't escapism, it's communion. They laugh to remember they're not alone. There's a reason comedians throughout history have been called truth tellers. Comedy can reveal what seriousness hides. Gumball uses humor the same way philosophers use questions to expose contradictions, to pry open assumptions, to make the unbearable visible. When he mocks authority, it's not rebellion for its own sake, it's the instinct to ask why. When he exaggerates everyday problems into melodrama, he's showing how small catastrophes actually feel from the inside. Every punchline carries empathy, every exaggeration carries truth. But the real heart of Gumball's comedy is humility. He's never truly the winner of his own joke. The laugh is almost always at his expense. He's the fool, the scapegoat, the chaos magnet, and in that humility lies wisdom. By making himself ridiculous, he makes the world gentler for everyone else. He tells the audience, it's okay to be stupid, it's okay to fail, it's okay to not understand what's going on. Because life doesn't make sense, and that's fine. In a way, Gumball's humor democratizes imperfection. It turns vulnerability into shared experience. There's a quiet moment, buried beneath all the slapstick, where you can sense the deeper current of his philosophy, that laughter is the closest thing we have to faith. It doesn't solve anything, but it keeps us going. It keeps us from giving up when the world's absurdity becomes too heavy to bear. Gumball laughs, because if he didn't, he'd have to scream. And laughter, even when it trembles, is still an act of hope. By the end of every disaster, every failed scheme, every emotional collapse, he always finds a way to make the audience smile. That's not denial, that's resilience. Because if you can turn pain into laughter, you've already turned despair into meaning. Comedy, for Gumball, is more than defense, it's renewal. It's the way he reclaims his story from the nonsense around him. In a universe that refuses logic, the joke becomes the truth, and the punchline becomes survival. Gumball Watterson lives in a world where reality is optional. Some days the universe treats him like a protagonist, other days it forgets he exists. One episode he's the smartest person in Elmore, the next he can't tie his shoes. He's been a hero, a villain, a background character, a narrator, even a mistake. And through all of it, he keeps asking the same question, not out loud, but with every bewildered glance at the camera, every sigh after the credits roll, every failed attempt to make sense of things. Who am I, if everything around me keeps changing? Gumball's world isn't just chaotic. It's self-aware. Elmore bends the fourth wall as casually as it bends physics. Characters argue with the narrator. Animations glitch. The entire town sometimes realizes it's inside a show, and then forgets again like a dream fading after sunrise. It's funny, surreal, and unsettling all at once. But for Gumball, it's more than a joke. It's the existential background noise of his life. He's aware that something about his world is unstable, that rules can shift, that people can vanish, that entire stories can be erased. And yet, he still tries to build an identity inside it. That effort, that stubbornness, is his quiet rebellion against unreality itself. In most stories, the self is a fixed thing. In Elmore, it's a moving target. Gumball is constantly being rewritten by context, by genre, by animation style, by the needs of the episode. Sometimes he's a slapstick clown, sometimes a philosopher, sometimes just a confused kid. He's stretched, flattened, digitized, remixed, and reinterpreted. Yet something in him remains intact. Maybe it's his voice, maybe his rhythm, maybe just that flicker of mischief behind every expression. Whatever it is, it holds him together. He's proof that identity isn't about consistency. It's about continuity, the ability to stay recognizable even when everything else shifts. And that's what makes Gumball strangely human. Because our own lives aren't that different. We play roles, we adapt to contexts, we reinvent ourselves depending on who's watching. Some versions of us vanish when the situation changes, others persist. The line between authenticity and performance blurs. Gumball just experiences that instability more literally. When his world reboots, when a story erases itself, he still carries the memory of who he was. Sometimes he even points it out, frustrated that no one else remembers. That's not just meta-humor. It's a subtle tragedy. He's the only one in Elmore who seems to realize that his reality can be deleted. And yet, he keeps living in it. This awareness gives him a strange kind of wisdom. Gumball understands that truth in Elmore is negotiable. You can edit it, argue with it, or ignore it, and it will still rearrange itself around you. But meaning, that's harder to destroy. Meaning has to be made and remade over and over again. So Gumball becomes a creator in his own right. He doesn't control the script, but he does control the tone. He narrates his own story, turns breakdowns into jokes, and somehow turns nonsense into philosophy. He builds identity not from stability, but from reaction. Every time the world shifts, he adjusts his shape but not his core. Sometimes, though, the cracks show. There are moments when Gumball's self-awareness becomes too heavy, when the comedy slips into unease. Episodes like The Disaster or The Void reveal what happens when he starts to question the limits of his world. When he realizes that things and people can simply be erased, his humor falters. He panics. He breaks down. For a brief moment, he looks out at the audience as if asking, "Is any of this real?" That question is too big for him to answer. So he does the only thing he can. He shrugs it off, makes a joke, and carries on. But you can feel it linger in the background. The laughter becomes softer, tinged with awareness. That's the paradox of Gumball's existence. He's a character designed to be funny, but he's aware enough to realize what that means. His purpose is to entertain, yet he still experiences disappointment, love, and loss as if they were real. He's a self-aware fiction trying to live sincerely. And that tension between performance and authenticity, between script and spontaneity, is what gives his humor emotional depth. When he winks at the camera, it's not just a joke. It's a plea for connection. A reminder that even if he's drawn and voiced and animated, he still wants to be understood. In that way, Gumball mirrors every person who's ever felt like they were playing a role in their own life. The way we repeat patterns, edit our stories, pretend to be fine for the sake of others, it's not so different from his constant reinvention. He's a cartoon, but his world exaggerates something deeply real about ours, that we live surrounded by performance. Social media, school, work, even friendship, they all ask for versions of us. We learn to shift tones, filter emotions, and adjust expressions until we forget which one was original. Gumball, lost between scripts, becomes a mirror for that confusion. And yet, even in all that uncertainty, he keeps something pure. He keeps laughing, keeps loving, keeps being himself, even when himself changes daily. That might be the deepest form of authenticity there is. To accept impermanence, to keep showing up to a story that might rewrite you at any moment. He never stops reacting. He never stops feeling. That persistence, that refusal to go numb, is what makes him real. The brilliance of the amazing world of Gumball lies in that subtle irony. That the most self-aware cartoon of all time ends up being one of the most sincere. By constantly breaking the fourth wall, it doesn't destroy the illusion of life, it strengthens it. Because when Gumball looks out of the screen, he's not mocking the audience. He's recognizing them, he's saying, I know you're there. I know this is ridiculous, but let's keep going anyway. And that's the heart of his identity. He's not a character pretending to be alive. He's a voice reminding us that even inside a joke, life still matters. When the credits roll and Elmore resets for the next episode, nothing he's learned seems to stick. The world forgets, but we don't. We remember the flashes of sincerity between the jokes, the quiet moments when a cartoon boy seems more real than the logic of his universe allows. That's the strange magic of Gumball Watterson. He proves that even a fictional life, drawn and rewritten 100 times, can still carry truth. The self doesn't need permanence to exist. It just needs awareness, a heartbeat of emotion, and a will to laugh through the uncertainty. Every story about Gumball Watterson begins with noise. Teachers lecturing, classmates shouting, his mother yelling from another room, and somewhere in the middle of it, his own voice, trying to be heard. For all his jokes, Gumball carries a quiet pressure inside him, the pressure of being everything everyone expects and nothing he really is. To his teachers, he's supposed to be a good student. To his mother, a responsible son. To his friends, the funny one who keeps the mood light. But Gumball is too restless, too curious, too alive to fit inside those roles. And so, between all the laughter, there's a subtle tension. The feeling of a kid trying to be everything at once and constantly falling short. In Elmore, expectation is everywhere. It seeps into every corner of the Watterson household. The unspoken idea that everyone has to keep up appearances, that success and love are measured by how much effort you show. Nicole, his mother, carries it like armor. She believes that if you push hard enough, if you fight long enough, you can outrun failure. Richard, his father, does the opposite. He runs from pressure so completely that he's turned avoidance into an art form. Gumball lives between those two extremes. Between the perfectionist and the dreamer, between the parent who expects everything and the one who expects nothing. It's no wonder he swings between overconfidence and collapse, between declaring himself a genius and realizing he forgot to do the homework. There's an episode called The Pressure, and even though it's about love, the title fits Gumball's entire life. He feels it all the time, the weight of proving himself, of making people laugh, of being noticed in a world that constantly resets. The thing about expectation is that it doesn't just shape what you do, it shapes how you see yourself. Every time Gumball disappoints someone, he feels smaller. Every time he manages to make them smile again, he feels whole. It's a cycle of self-worth that depends entirely on reaction. He defines himself by feedback. And that's a dangerous kind of gravity because it means his happiness is never fully his own. School is where he feels this most sharply. In class, he's expected to be serious, but the structure suffocates him. He's too creative, too impulsive, too prone to chasing tangents that make sense only to him. His teachers mistake that energy for laziness, but it's really something else, a refusal to conform to a system that feels meaningless. Elmore Junior High isn't just a school, it's a small-scale version of society, full of contradictions, rules that change by the day, and people pretending they understand them. Gumball plays along, but deep down, he knows he's faking it. And so, he turns his confusion into comedy, his frustration into jokes. It's how he takes control of a game he was never built to win. Then there's his family, the source of his love and his biggest burden. Nicole's Ambition runs through the house like an electric current. She wants Gumball to be better than his circumstances, to work hard, to do his best. But best is a slippery word. To Nicole, it means achievement. To Gumball, it means expression. When he paints a wall instead of finishing his project, she sees wasted potential. He sees art. When he goofs off during chores, she sees irresponsibility. He sees imagination. Their conflict isn't really about discipline. It's about definition. Nicole wants him to grow into the kind of person who can survive the world. Gumball wants to grow into the kind of person who can enjoy it. Richard, on the other hand, teaches him the opposite lesson. From his father, Gumball learns the philosophy of detachment, the idea that it's okay not to care, that life will find its balance if you just stop fighting it. But Gumball isn't built for apathy. His mind is too active, his emotions too loud. He watches his father's carefree existence with envy and confusion, wondering how someone can be so unbothered by the world's expectations. Part of him wants to inherit that freedom. Another part is terrified by it. The truth is that Gumball needs both of his parents' philosophies in balance, Nicole's drive and Richard's surrender, but at his age, he can only swing between them, ricocheting from ambition to exhaustion and back again. The result is a boy who tries too hard and gives up too easily. He'll throw himself into a plan with manic energy, only to collapse when it fails. He wants to be admired but not controlled, responsible but not boring, unique but not alone. That contradiction defines him. It's why he's so funny, because every joke he tells is a way of lightening that pressure. Laughter, for Gumball, isn't just survival, it's release. It's the moment the expectations dissolve, and he's allowed to just exist, without performance, without guilt, without needing to prove anything. For those few seconds of laughter, he's free. The tragedy and the beauty of Gumball's character is that he's constantly trapped between who he is and who he's supposed to be. But what makes him remarkable is that he never stops trying to bridge that gap. Every episode, in its own strange way, is a rehearsal for adulthood. He experiments with different versions of himself. The hero, the rebel, the victim, the philosopher, and fails at all of them. But each failure teaches him a little more about authenticity. He starts to realize that maybe the goal isn't to meet expectations at all. Maybe the goal is to see which ones actually belong to you. That's why Gumball's story, despite all its chaos, feels universal. Everyone grows up under the weight of invisible rules. Everyone learns to navigate between pride and pressure, between who they want to be and who they think they should be. Gumball just lives that tension more vividly, with every exaggerated expression and every melodramatic outburst. He reminds us that expectation is both structure and prison. It gives shape to life, but it also squeezes the air out of it. The trick, as he slowly learns, is to laugh without losing yourself, to take the weight seriously enough to care, but lightly enough to keep breathing. So he keeps moving, keeps stumbling, keeps performing. Some days he gets it right, some days he doesn't, but he never stops believing that one day he'll figure out how to live on his own terms. Maybe that's what growing up really means in Elmore. Not becoming perfect, but becoming peaceful. The pressure never goes away. It just becomes quieter, easier to carry, until one day you realize you've been carrying it for so long that it's no longer a burden. It's just life. And if you can laugh while holding it, maybe that's enough. Behind every joke, every meltdown, and every small victory in Gumball Watterson's life, there is the shadow of his mother, Nicole. She is the force that shapes him even when he pretends she doesn't. She's the quiet storm in the background of every episode, the heartbeat of the Watterson family, and the reminder that chaos doesn't exist without order trying to contain it. If Elmore is a world where nothing makes sense, then Nicole is the one person still trying to make sense of it. And that, more than anything, is what makes her story and Gumball's relationship with her so complex. Because for Gumball, Nicole isn't just a parent. She's a philosophy he can't escape. Nicole Watterson is everything her son is not. Focused, driven, sharp, disciplined. She works herself into exhaustion because she believes love is expressed through effort. Every demand she makes, every rule she enforces, every moment she snaps is rooted in fear. The fear that if she doesn't hold everything together, it will all fall apart. In many ways, she's not wrong. The Watterson family runs on the friction between her structure and everyone else's chaos. Without Nicole, the house would collapse. But with her, it trembles. Her perfectionism keeps the family alive, but it also exhausts them. Especially Gumball, who lives in the space between admiring her strength and resenting her control. It's easy to see where that tension comes from. Gumball grew up watching Nicole sacrifice everything, her time, her patience, her dreams, for the sake of her family. He knows how much she loves them, but he also sees how much it hurts her. She pushes herself so hard that she forgets she's allowed to rest. And somewhere in the middle of that struggle, Gumball learned to measure himself by the same impossible standards. That's why he panics when he disappoints her. Why he makes jokes when she's angry. Why he tries and fails and tries again. Deep down, he's not just afraid of being in trouble. He's afraid of becoming a reflection of her frustration, of inheriting the same fear of failure that drives her. Episodes like The Choices show us the weight Nicole carries. We see glimpses of who she was before responsibility took over. A dreamer, a fighter, someone full of life and promise. She gave all of that up for the family she loves. But love, when built on self-sacrifice, turns brittle over time. It hardens into expectation. It becomes something that demands to be earned. And that's what Gumball feels most intensely. The quiet implication that he has to deserve his mother's love. Of course, Nicole would never say that out loud. In her heart, she knows she loves him unconditionally. But children don't hear intentions. They hear tone. They hear the sighs, the scolding, the moments of disappointment. And to Gumball, those moments echo louder than the words. When Nicole yells, it's rarely about the thing she's yelling about. It's about everything that came before it. Every missed opportunity, every unwashed dish, every report card that didn't live up to her hope. She's carrying the entire weight of a life she never got to finish, and Gumball happens to be standing in its shadow. He feels it even when she smiles, even when she says she's proud. He knows the way her voice trembles when she's holding in frustration, the way she tries to control her temper because she's scared of what she might say. And so, without realizing it, Gumball becomes the mirror she never wanted. The part of herself that refuses to grow up. The irony, of course, is that Gumball's chaos comes from the same place as Nicole's control. Fear. Hers manifests as overwork. His as avoidance. She fights the world by tightening her grip. He fights it by letting go completely. Together, they form a strange balance, a push and pull between order and surrender, responsibility and rebellion. When they clash, it's not because they're opposites, it's because they're too alike. They both want to feel safe in a world that refuses stability. They both want to believe that love can fix what fear destroys. And they both keep learning in their own ways that it's not that simple. There's a scene in The Parents that captures their relationship perfectly. Gumball accidentally pushes Nicole too far, and for a brief moment she breaks. Her composure slips, her voice cracks, and all her years of buried frustration spill out. It's not anger anymore. It's sadness. She looks at her family, at Gumball especially, and realizes that she's been trying so hard to protect them that she forgot to enjoy them. Gumball doesn't know how to respond. For once, the world stops being funny. The jokes feel hollow. He sees his mother not as a wall, but as a person, tired, scared, human. And that realization softens him. He starts to understand that love isn't supposed to be a battle. Sometimes it's just a truce. For Gumball, that moment is transformative. He starts to see Nicole not as the enemy of his freedom, but as the reason he has any freedom at all. Every rule she enforces is a wall built out of love, not control. Every demand is an act of faith, her way of believing he can do better. But that doesn't mean he stops resisting. He still argues, still pushes boundaries, still mocks her seriousness. Because rebellion is how he learns independence. It's his way of reminding her, and himself, that he's his own person. Their conflict becomes a kind of dialogue between generations, between fear and faith. She teaches him discipline, he teaches her forgiveness, and in between, they keep each other human. If you look closely, Gumball's humor changes depending on who he's with. Around Darwin, it's playful. Around Penny, it's tender. Around Nicole, it's defensive. He uses jokes to deflect, to avoid vulnerability. When she yells, he exaggerates. When she grounds him, he negotiates with sarcasm. It's his way of protecting himself from her disappointment, to make the situation absurd before it can become painful. He'd rather be ridiculous than responsible, because responsibility in his mind is where happiness goes to die. But slowly, through Nicole, he learns that responsibility isn't punishment, it's connection. Taking care of others isn't the end of fun. It's what gives fun its meaning. Over the seasons, that lesson grows quietly in the background. You see it when Gumball tries to help her, when he comforts her, when he defends her from others. The moments are rare, but when they happen, they reveal how deeply he understands her. He knows how hard she's trying, even when she doesn't say it. He knows she's afraid of losing control because control is all she's ever had. And somewhere inside him, he forgives her for that. Because he knows, even if he'd never admit it, that he got his strength from her. His stubbornness, his emotional fire, his belief that life can be better. They're all Nicole's gifts, reshaped through chaos. That's the tragedy and the beauty of their bond. They're mirrors of each other's worst and best instincts. Nicole fears becoming weak, and Gumball fears becoming her. But both of them are wrong about what weakness really means. They see it as failure. The truth is that weakness is what makes them lovable. When Nicole finally cries, when she lets herself be imperfect, the family becomes closer. When Gumball finally admits he's scared, she stops seeing him as a child to correct and starts seeing him as a person to understand. That's the moment their philosophies meet. When control and chaos realize they've been chasing the same thing all along. Safety, love, and the right to rest. For Gumball, living under Nicole's shadow is a constant negotiation between admiration and rebellion. He wants to make her proud, but not by becoming her. He wants to succeed, but on his own terms. That's why he tests her limits, mocks her rules, and questions everything she believes. It's not defiance for the sake of it. It's self-definition. Every argument between them is really an act of love in disguise, a way of saying, I'm growing up. Let me show you how. And Nicole, though she'll never admit it out loud, respects that. Because deep down, she wants him to be free in a way she never was. By the later seasons, their dynamic evolves into something softer. The fights are still loud, the chaos still constant, but there's more understanding underneath. Nicole starts to see that her son doesn't need to be perfect. He just needs to be honest. And Gumball starts to see that his mother's expectations come from fear, not pride. Once he realizes that, the anger fades. He stops trying to win and starts trying to listen. The two of them will probably never have peace for long, not in a town like Elmore, but they find small moments of harmony. A hug after an argument, a shared laugh, a quiet look of mutual recognition. For them, that's enough. In the end, Nicole's shadow isn't something Gumball escapes. It's something he learns to live within. It's the shape that defines his world, the standard he measures himself against, and the reason he learns empathy. Because if he can forgive his mother for being human, maybe he can forgive himself too. That's the lesson hiding inside their noise. That love isn't about control or achievement. It's about endurance. It's about standing in each other's shadows and realizing that even when the light shifts, the connection doesn't fade. Gumball's laughter and Nicole's discipline are just two sides of the same survival. One learns to let go, the other learns to hold on. Together they make something resembling balance. When you think about it, maybe Gumball's story isn't about escaping his mother's expectations at all. Maybe it's about inheriting her strength without her fear. He learns that structure doesn't have to mean suffocation, that effort doesn't have to mean exhaustion. He learns that love can be loud and messy and still be real. And maybe one day, Nicole will look at him, at the boy who refuses to give up even when he doesn't understand why he's trying, and see herself, not as the person she failed to be, but as the reason he became who he is. Because in the end, Gumball Watterson doesn't exist in spite of Nicole's shadow. He exists because of it. Her discipline gave shape to his chaos. Her pressure gave weight to his dreams. Her flaws gave him permission to laugh at his own. And through that strange, imperfect inheritance, both of them become more human. Nicole learns to rest. Gumball learns to care. And somewhere between them, amid the shouting and the laughter, the world makes just enough sense to keep going. If Nicole Watterson is the structure that holds the family together, Richard Watterson is the gravity that lets it fall apart. He is the center of every mess, the origin of every disaster, the embodiment of Elmore's absurdity distilled into one enormous pink man-child who never learned to grow up. On the surface, he's a parody of laziness, the eternal couch potato, the father who forgets bills, burns dinner, and turns every minor task into catastrophe. But beneath all the jokes, Richard represents something much deeper. He is freedom, raw, unfiltered, impractical, and terrifying. And for Gumball, who lives under the shadow of his mother's expectations, his father's indifference becomes both an invitation and a warning. Richard doesn't understand the rules of life, and he doesn't seem to care that he doesn't. Where Nicole measures worth through effort, Richard measures it through enjoyment. His entire existence is an argument against responsibility. He sleeps late, eats constantly, avoids conflict, and approaches the world like a playground. He isn't a philosopher by intention, but he lives by a philosophy that is quietly radical in its simplicity. If it's not fun, why bother? On the surface, that sounds childish, even selfish. But there's something strangely wise about it too. Richard refuses to be broken by a world that punishes imperfection. He refuses to let fear dictate his happiness. And though that freedom often causes chaos for everyone else, it also protects a part of him that most adults lose: the ability to live without shame. Gumball sees both sides of this every day. He loves his father for his warmth, for his unfiltered joy, for the way he turns every inconvenience into a game. Richard is the one who reminds him that life doesn't always have to be serious, that mistakes don't have to be moral failures, that sometimes it's okay to laugh instead of fix. But he also sees the cost. Richard's freedom comes with a shadow of its own: neglect, avoidance, and denial. He ignores problems until they explode, hides from responsibility until someone else cleans it up, and drifts through life as though consequences are optional. To a child, that looks like magic. To an adult, it looks like sadness. There's an episode called The Man where Gumball tries to help his father act more mature, only to realize that growing up doesn't mean losing your spark. By the end, he sees that his father's childishness, for all its flaws, comes from a place of innocence. A refusal to let the world turn him bitter. But what Gumball doesn't see, at least not yet, is that Richard's happiness is fragile. It's built on avoidance, not acceptance. He laughs to ignore the world, not to understand it. His peace depends on other people carrying the weight he refuses to touch. And that's what makes him both inspiring and tragic. A man who found a way to stay happy, but only by never looking too closely. For Nicole, Richard is the constant test of patience. For Gumball, he's the question mark at the end of every lesson. When Nicole says, "try harder," Richard says, "why?" When Nicole tells Gumball to plan ahead, Richard says, "just wing it." He exists as a living counter-argument to every rule. And while that often drives his family mad, it also forces them to consider what rules actually matter. Because the truth is, Richard isn't entirely wrong. There's something deeply human in his laziness, a kind of unspoken protest against a world that expects constant effort. In his own ridiculous way, he's rejecting the same pressures that torment Nicole. He just chose the opposite escape route. The result is that Gumball grows up caught between two contradictory blueprints: Nicole's control and Richard's surrender. One teaches him discipline, the other teaches him ease. And like any child of opposites, he becomes both anxious and carefree, ambitious and lazy, restless and content. When he procrastinates, you can see Richard in him. When he panics afterward, you can see Nicole. Their philosophies duel inside him daily, shaping his identity in ways neither parent fully understands. Gumball's humor, his unpredictability, his endless ability to bounce back from failure, all of it comes from navigating the impossible middle ground between the two people who raised him. But beyond the jokes and accidents, Richard's character holds a quiet sadness that the show rarely says aloud. Underneath the smiles and giggles, there's a sense that he knows he's a burden, that he's aware, at least in fleeting moments, of how much Nicole sacrifices to keep him afloat. You can see it in the way he looks at her after one of his catastrophes, the brief flicker of guilt before he laughs it off. Richard isn't oblivious, he's scared. He's spent so long avoiding responsibility that the idea of facing it feels like death. And that fear of growing up, of disappointing people, of being seen as inadequate, is something Gumball inherits too. There's a scene in The Responsible where Richard tries to help take care of Aeneas, only to make everything worse. The comedy of the moment hides a deeper truth. He genuinely wants to help. He just doesn't know how. His heart is in the right place, but his habits aren't. That's the tragedy of Richard. He feels everything deeply but lacks the tools to express it constructively. His love for his family is huge and real, but it manifests through chaos, indulgence, and distraction. He hugs too tightly, eats too much, laughs too loudly. He's always too much of something, because too much is the only way he knows how to exist. For Gumball, watching that paradox is confusing. He sees his father's happiness and wants it. He sees his father's failures and fears them. He wants to live freely, but not carelessly. To enjoy life, but still be trusted. And so, he oscillates between imitation and rejection. When life feels overwhelming, he leans into Richard's philosophy. The don't worry about it shrug that turns panic into play. But when he sees the consequences of that mindset, when his family suffers, or when Nicole breaks under the weight, he swings back toward responsibility. It's a dance between extremes, a rhythm he never quite masters. But maybe mastery was never the point. Maybe the point is balance. To laugh like his father without forgetting the work his mother does to make that laughter possible. Richard's freedom teaches Gumball something subtle but profound. That happiness isn't the absence of responsibility, but the ability to find joy inside it. It's not about running from what's hard. It's about refusing to let difficulty erase delight. Richard doesn't articulate that lesson. He lives it, clumsily and inconsistently, but sincerely. And Gumball, through all his mistakes, slowly learns to refine it. He learns to find laughter not just in escape, but in acceptance. That's the difference between them. Richard laughs to avoid fear. Gumball learns to laugh through it. Still, there's something enviable about Richard's simplicity. In a world as overstimulated as Elmore, a world full of screens, noise, and constant motion, Richard's blank contentment becomes a kind of purity. He lives fully in the moment, unbothered by the past or future. He's immune to self-consciousness, to status anxiety, to the existential dread that creeps into more serious characters. In a strange way, he's what every philosopher dreams of becoming, a being unburdened by meaning. Of course, in practice, that enlightenment comes with unpaid bills and forgotten birthdays. But the spirit of it is oddly serene. Richard has found peace in absurdity, something Gumball is still learning how to do. And maybe that's why, despite everything, Gumball never truly resents him. He might get angry, might roll his eyes, might call him lazy. But deep down, he admires him. He sees in his father a kind of joy that feels untouchable, even holy. Richard's happiness doesn't depend on achievement, approval, or control. It just is. It's primal, unconditional, and contagious. When Gumball laughs with him, the noise of the world fades. The pressure from Nicole, the expectations from school, the confusion of growing up, all of it melts into background static. For a few fleeting moments, there's only warmth, chaos, and love. That's the secret gift Richard gives his family. The reminder that even when life is messy, it's still worth enjoying. Of course, freedom without awareness eventually collapses. Richard's denial has consequences. His inability to face difficulty forces others to bear his share of reality. Nicole's exhaustion, Gumball's confusion, Anaïs's premature maturity, they're all ripples from his refusal to grow. And the show, in its own way, holds him accountable. It never excuses his behavior entirely. It laughs with him, but it also reveals the cost of his simplicity. Because love, when detached from effort, becomes dependence. And Richard's love, as genuine as it is, often demands more than it gives. Yet that imbalance doesn't erase his value. It just makes him human. Richard isn't supposed to be a model of fatherhood. He's a reflection of what happens when a person chooses joy over growth. And in that choice, he embodies both the tragedy and beauty of the human condition. The longing to stay young, to stay unbroken, to stay safe from the harshness of awareness. Gumball will spend his entire life trying to reconcile that, to find a way to keep the lightness without the blindness. And maybe that's what makes Richard's freedom so powerful. It's not an example to follow. It's a riddle to solve. In one of the show's quieter moments, Gumball and Richard share a rare, honest conversation. Gumball asks him if he's ever scared, of being a bad father, of disappointing his family. Richard pauses, thinking harder than usual, and says something simple like, "Of course I am, son. That's why I don't think about it." It's a joke, but it's also the truth. Richard's fear is so big that he's built an entire personality around avoiding it. And yet, he loves his family enough to let them see it anyway, even if only through laughter. For Gumball, that's the closest thing to a lesson. That even if you can't fix everything, you can still love loudly, unapologetically, and without measure. By the later seasons, Gumball's understanding of his father deepens. He stops seeing Richard as a failure and starts seeing him as someone who made peace with himself. Imperfectly, but sincerely. He realizes that everyone escapes something. Nicole escapes fear through control. Richard escapes control through ignorance. Both are trying to survive the same world, just in opposite ways. And in that realization, Gumball finds compassion. He stops judging and starts observing. He begins to understand that freedom isn't about doing nothing. It's about not letting fear decide what you do. That's the inheritance Richard gives him. A kind of emotional immunity. The ability to find joy even when everything else fails. The courage to be silly when the world expects composure. The audacity to laugh when logic says you shouldn't. Gumball takes that energy and refines it, turning recklessness into resilience, laziness into lightness. Where Richard stops at denial, Gumball continues into understanding. He learns that real freedom isn't avoidance, it's acceptance without surrender. In the end, Richard's freedom is messy, dangerous, and incomplete, but it's also necessary. Without it, the Wattersons would collapse under Nicole's perfectionism. Without his absurd optimism, the family's mistakes would feel unbearable. He reminds them that love doesn't always look like guidance. Sometimes it looks like distraction. Sometimes it's the laughter that fills the silence after failure. Sometimes it's the reminder that even if you've done everything wrong, the world keeps spinning anyway. For Gumball, Richard is both a mirror and a warning, a glimpse of what happens if you stop growing, but also proof that joy can survive anything. His father's world may be small, but is full of colour. His mind may be simple, but his heart is infinite. And maybe, in the end, that's enough. Because if Nicole teaches Gumball how to carry the weight of the world, Richard teaches him how to put it down. Between the two of them, Gumball learns what every human and every cartoon eventually must. That balance isn't found in perfection, but in permission. The permission to rest, to laugh, to be. Every great story about Gumball Watterson eventually leads back to Darwin. In a world that bends, collapses, and rewrites itself without warning, Darwin is the only constant. He's Gumball's brother, his conscience, his mirror, and sometimes the only reason he finds his way back to himself. If Gumball is the storm, Darwin is the calm that follows it. If Gumball's laughter is survival, Darwin's kindness is meaning. And though he began as just a pet goldfish who somehow grew legs and joined the family, over time he became something much more profound, the living heart of Elmore. To understand Darwin is to understand love without condition. He was born from Gumball's world, but not from his biology. He entered the family by accident, and yet his loyalty never wavered. The miracle of Darwin isn't that he learned to walk or talk, it's that he learned to care. He approaches the world with unguarded sincerity, a softness that never hardens, even when life gives him reasons to. He doesn't fight the world the way Gumball does. He embraces it. He believes in people until they give him no reason to, and even then, part of him keeps believing anyway. Darwin's optimism isn't ignorance, it's courage. It's the quiet strength to stay gentle in a place that rewards cynicism. From the beginning, Darwin's purpose was to be a companion, a reflection of Gumball's better nature. But somewhere along the way, he became his own person. He learned to say no, to stand up for what he believed in, to call Gumball out when his recklessness went too far. He grew from sidekick to equal, from echo to anchor, and yet, even as he matured, he never lost his childlike purity. That's what makes him such a rare character, a soul that grows wiser without growing colder. Every laugh, every apology, every tear he sheds carries the same quiet message, that kindness isn't weakness and love isn't naive. Darwin's light shines most clearly when the world around him darkens. In moments when Gumball spirals, when his schemes fall apart, or when he lashes out in pride, Darwin is there, not to scold, but to listen. His empathy works like gravity, pulling everyone back toward each other. It's not dramatic, not loud. He just stays. In the words, when Gumball's thoughtless insults hurt those around him, it's Darwin who helps him see the damage. Not through guilt, but through compassion. He doesn't say, "You're wrong." He says, "You can do better." That's the difference between judgment and love. Darwin never condemns. He invites healing. It's easy to mistake Darwin's kindness for simplicity. His wide eyes, his high voice, his constant positivity make him seem naive. But if you pay attention, you start to notice the depth underneath. Darwin isn't oblivious to pain. He just refuses to let it make him cruel. In the tag, he struggles with jealousy and insecurity, realizing he wants to be seen as more than Gumball's sidekick. In the hero, he questions what it means to admire someone flawed. And in the origins, we see that his first instinct, even as a goldfish, was to love. That instinct has never left him. It's what defines him. Unconditional affection as philosophy. Gumball, by contrast, is always reaching for meaning, for validation, for something beyond himself. Darwin reaches inward. His happiness doesn't depend on control or recognition. It comes from connection. When Gumball schemes, Darwin listens. When Gumball panics, Darwin comforts. When Gumball overthinks, Darwin laughs. Their relationship isn't just friendship, it's equilibrium. They're opposite halves of a single emotional system. Gumball gives the spark, Darwin gives the warmth. One without the other would collapse. In many ways, Darwin is what Gumball could be if he ever stopped fighting himself. He embodies all the lessons Gumball keeps trying to learn. Acceptance, empathy, patience. And yet, Darwin's kindness doesn't make him passive. He can be firm when he needs to be. In the Origins Part 2, when Gumball abandons him, Darwin doesn't disappear quietly. He searches, he struggles, he finds his way back. His loyalty isn't blind, it's chosen. He chooses to love Gumball even after being forgotten. That's not weakness, that's conviction. Darwin's light doesn't just illuminate others, it reveals them. Around him, people become better versions of themselves. Gumball becomes more thoughtful. Nicole becomes softer. Even Richard, in his own clumsy way, becomes more affectionate. There's a tenderness Darwin brings out in everyone, as though his presence alone reminds them of who they were before life got complicated. He sees people not as they are, but as they could be, and that vision quietly changes them. In a world built on absurdity, his empathy is the only thing that feels truly sacred. But that purity comes with a cost. Being the emotional center of a chaotic world means Darwin often absorbs its pain. When others are angry, he's the one who feels it. When they fight, he's the one who tries to fix it. His desire to make everyone happy sometimes leaves him stretched thin, unsure of where his responsibility ends. In the party, he compromises himself to fit in, only to realize that authenticity matters more than acceptance. And in the mirror, he struggles with self-image, realizing that even kindness can be exhausting when you're constantly expected to be the peacekeeper. Darwin learns the hard way that love needs boundaries, that compassion doesn't mean self-erasure. That's what makes his relationship with Gumball so profound. Gumball tests Darwin constantly, pushing him, teasing him, taking his patience for granted. But Darwin rarely gives up on him. Not because he's naive, but because he understands something Gumball doesn't yet. That love isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. Darwin sees Gumball's flaws not as failures, but as cries for connection. He loves him through the chaos, through the mistakes, through the noise. And in doing so, he teaches Gumball how to love himself. In The Bros, there's a moment when Gumball tells Darwin he's the best friend he's ever had, and Darwin simply replies, "I know." It's a simple line, but it carries an entire philosophy. Darwin doesn't need grand gestures or reassurances. He loves without the insecurity that haunts Gumball. His confidence isn't pride, it's peace. He doesn't measure his worth by comparison. He just exists in love, effortlessly, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. That kind of peace can't be taught. It has to be witnessed. And Gumball has been witnessing it his entire life. Sometimes, Gumball's energy burns too hot for Darwin's calm. There are moments when Darwin's patience runs out, when he snaps, when his kindness becomes self-defense. But even then, his anger feels pure, not the kind that wants to hurt, but the kind that wants to be understood. Darwin's emotions are never manipulative. They're transparent, honest, and immediate. When he's hurt, you know. When he forgives, you feel it. In that way, he's the moral compass of the Watterson family, not because he's perfect, but because he's real. In a broader sense, Darwin represents something beyond character. He's the embodiment of what the amazing world of Gumball values most: empathy as survival. In a universe where logic fails, where chaos reigns, where even existence itself is unstable, the only thing that keeps the characters anchored is emotion. And Darwin is that emotion. He's the pulse of the show, the steady rhythm that keeps it from collapsing into absurdity. Without him, Elmore would eat itself alive. With him, even the strangest nonsense feels human. The irony is that Darwin, the least human character, is also the most humane. He doesn't question his worth, doesn't wrestle with existential doubt the way Gumball does. He accepts himself completely. That acceptance radiates outward, healing everyone around him. It's a kind of enlightenment disguised as innocence, the wisdom of someone who never learned to be cynical. His simplicity isn't a lack of depth. It's the depth that comes from clarity. He sees the world without the filters of fear or pride. Where others see chaos, he sees opportunity for understanding. And yet, even light casts shadows. Darwin's empathy can't fix everything. There are moments when he realizes that not everyone wants to be saved. That kindness sometimes meets cruelty and finds no way through. In those moments, his heart breaks quietly. He doesn't retaliate. He grieves, then forgives, because that's who he is. But those cracks in his optimism make him even more beautiful. They remind us that gentleness isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to keep your heart open after it's been hurt. Gumball, for all his noise, notices this more than he admits. When Darwin hurts, he changes. He becomes protective, attentive, even tender. He realizes that his brother's light isn't invincible, that it needs care too. In those rare moments, their bond deepens into something beyond friendship. They become two halves of the same lesson, that love needs both softness and strength to survive. Gumball provides the chaos that makes Darwin's calm meaningful. Darwin provides the calm that makes Gumball's chaos bearable. Over time, you start to realize that Darwin's presence is what gives the amazing world of Gumball its emotional center. He's the quiet reason the show's absurdity doesn't collapse into nihilism. Without him, Elmore would be a series of jokes about futility. With him, it becomes a story about resilience. He's the proof that even in a world made of nonsense, love can still make sense. The last great truth about Darwin is that his light isn't just something he gives, it's something he inspires. Every person who encounters him, from Gumball to Nicole to Penny, to even the most antagonistic characters, changes in small ways. They soften. They reflect. They remember what it feels like to be kind. Darwin doesn't transform people through speeches or logic. He does it by being himself, by existing without armor. That's the most radical thing of all in a world obsessed with self-defense. The courage to be open. So what does Gumball learn from him? He learns that joy can be quiet. That love doesn't have to prove itself. That being right is less important than being kind. Darwin teaches him that empathy isn't weakness, and humor isn't the only way to survive pain. There's another way, one that's gentler, slower, but just as strong. To forgive, to listen, to stay. In the end, Darwin's light doesn't just guide Gumball, it defines him. Without Darwin, Gumball would lose himself in noise, in ego, in endless performance. With Darwin, he remembers who he's supposed to be. Not a hero, not a genius, not even a comedian, but a person capable of love. That's the real magic of Darwin Watterson. He turns absurdity into compassion. He turns a cartoon into something human. And through him, we learn that maybe kindness isn't the opposite of chaos, but it's completion. The one thing that can turn disorder into connection. In a world as chaotic and ever-shifting as Elmore, love rarely takes a single shape. It morphs. It flickers. It hides. It returns in strange forms. And for Gumball Watterson, love has always looked like one person. Penny Fitzgerald. She began as a mystery, a crush, a golden-haired figure wrapped in the comfort of predictability. She was kind, polite, composed, the calm against his noise. But as Gumball grew, and as the world around them began to distort into deeper strangeness, so did she. And somewhere along the way, the girl who once represented simplicity became something else entirely. A mirror of change, a symbol of truth, and the quiet proof that love, to be real, must learn to adapt. At first, Gumball's love for Penny was simple, almost cliché, a cartoon crush built from distance and fantasy. She was the girl next door, radiant and gentle, who seemed to embody everything Gumball thought he wasn't. She was stability in a town that refused logic. In the early seasons, his affection for her was light-hearted, clumsy, full of exaggerated gestures and schoolyard drama. He loved her the way kids love the idea of love, as a story to perform, a dream to chase. But the beauty of the amazing world of Gumball is that even its jokes about romance eventually turn into meditations on vulnerability. Gumball's infatuation, at first a running gag, slowly evolves into something genuine, something fragile enough to change him. The turning point came in The Shell. It's one of the show's most quietly profound moments, the kind that transforms a comedy into something almost poetic. Penny sheds her literal shell and reveals her true form, a shape-shifting, luminous being who can morph into anything. What could have been a gimmick instead becomes metaphor. The shell wasn't just part of her body. It was the mask of identity she wore to make others comfortable. When she breaks free, she isn't changing into something new. She's revealing what she's always been. Gumball's reaction, shock, fear, awe, and finally acceptance, mirrors the journey of learning what love actually means. It's not the fantasy of perfection he loved. It's the reality of change. That moment defines Gumball's philosophy of love. He learns instinctively and beautifully that loving someone means loving their evolution. Penny's transformation doesn't scare him because it's strange. It scares him because it's honest. She becomes a literal embodiment of what Gumball has always been running from: impermanence. In her, he sees the truth that everything changes, and that love isn't the act of holding on. It's the act of staying open as things shift. For the first time, he stops performing romance and starts feeling it. The humor fades into sincerity, and his usual sarcasm becomes something softer, almost reverent. From then on, Penny becomes more than just a crush. She becomes a teacher. Through her, Gumball learns how to balance emotion with empathy, excitement with respect. Their relationship, though often comedic and awkward, reflects a kind of growing emotional intelligence. He stops trying to impress her and starts trying to understand her. He learns that connection isn't built through grand gestures, but through small consistencies. The shared laughter, the apologies, the moments of vulnerability that slip between jokes. For a boy who treats every day like a performance, Penny is the one person who makes him drop the act. Penny's shape-shifting power carries endless symbolism. Every form she takes, animal, object, abstraction, reflects something about emotion. She changes when she feels, when she loves, when she's afraid. She doesn't repress her transformations, she lets them happen. And that's what Gumball admires most about her. She lives honestly in her emotions. In contrast, Gumball hides behind humor, behind irony, behind the safety of noise. Loving Penny means learning how to be vulnerable without disguises. In her presence, his usual defenses crumble. He becomes quieter, more genuine, more self-aware. For once, he doesn't need to be funny to be seen. Their love isn't perfect. It stumbles, collapses, restarts, but that's what makes it feel real. They argue, misunderstand each other, and drift apart, only to find their way back again. Every mistake becomes another layer in their understanding. Penny challenges Gumball not by opposing him, but by grounding him. When he spirals into absurdity, she looks at him with a kind of calm that reminds him reality still exists. She doesn't try to fix him. She simply stands there, unshaken, until he remembers how to breathe. It's the kind of love that doesn't demand transformation, but quietly inspires it. In many ways, Penny's existence redefines what romance looks like in a show like Gumball. It's not about melodrama or destiny. It's about discovery. It asks what happens when two people who are both still figuring themselves out decide to grow beside each other, rather than toward perfection. Penny's transformations mirror adolescence itself, the awkward, fluid process of becoming, and Gumball's acceptance of her mirrors emotional maturity, the ability to love not the image, but the essence. For all his chaos, Gumball learns something profound through her. That love doesn't erase uncertainty. It teaches you how to live inside it. There's a certain poetry in how the shell uses visual metaphor to express emotional truth. When Penny breaks open her shell, it's not an act of rebellion, it's liberation. And when Gumball kisses her, it's not just a confession of love, it's a promise to see her fully. That moment, quiet and glowing, lingers as one of the show's emotional peaks. It's where Gumball's story shifts from ironic to sincere. From that point on, his jokes about love start carrying sincerity beneath the humor. He begins to treat affection not as performance, but as truth. Penny teaches him how to mean what he says. But even beyond romance, Penny's philosophy of openness contrasts beautifully with Gumball's chaos. She doesn't fear what she doesn't understand. She flows with it. Her fluidity isn't just physical, it's spiritual. She accepts contradiction as part of life. She doesn't need logic to find peace. In that sense, she's closer to the cosmic beings of Oo than to the citizens of Elmore. Her calm flexibility, her willingness to change form rather than fight it, makes her almost elemental, a personification of harmony amid disorder. Gumball, who is defined by conflict, finds balance in her presence. Where he burns, she cools. Where he questions, she accepts. Yet Penny isn't perfect, and the show never paints her as an idealized figure. Her kindness can become pressure, her composure can turn into distance. She's still learning too. Sometimes she struggles with her own identity, unsure which version of herself feels true. In The Date, we see her nervousness about how others perceive her, her fear that Gumball might love the idea of her more than her reality. That insecurity makes her beautifully human. It's easy to forget that under the glowing transformations, she's still a teenager trying to figure out how to exist. And that's what connects her and Gumball most deeply. They're both learning to love while still learning to be people. Their relationship becomes a quiet metaphor for emotional evolution. In earlier episodes, love was a chase. Later, it becomes a conversation. They learn that affection isn't about constant excitement, but about shared growth. They make mistakes, forgive, and move forward. Penny teaches Gumball how to be still. Gumball teaches Penny how to laugh. They find a rhythm between movement and stillness, chaos and calm. And in that rhythm, they discover something neither of them could have found alone. The kind of love that doesn't demand understanding to exist. What's striking is how Gumball handles romance without irony. For a show built on satire, it treats emotional honesty with surprising tenderness. Penny's relationship with Gumball resists cynicism. It doesn't mock the sincerity of young love, it protects it. The writers allow their feelings to exist without apology, framing their awkwardness as something sacred rather than silly. That sincerity, rare in modern storytelling, gives their connection timelessness. It turns a childhood crush into a meditation on identity, acceptance, and the strange beauty of growing up together. As Gumball matures, his love for Penny stops being about how she makes him feel and starts being about who she is. He becomes less interested in idealizing her and more interested in understanding her inner world. He begins to see that love isn't about completing someone. It's about witnessing them. And Penny, in turn, loves Gumball not because he's perfect, but because he's trying. Because even in his chaos, his humor, his countless mistakes, he never stops caring. Their love isn't epic. It's intimate. It's built from the smallest gestures, the way they look at each other after an argument, the laughter that returns when words fail, the quiet trust that says, "You can be anything, and I'll still be here." In the end, Penny and Gumball's relationship isn't about transformation, it's about revelation. Penny's shapeshifting isn't about changing who she is, it's about showing more of it. And Gumball's love for her isn't about turning her into something he understands, it's about learning to love what he doesn't. Together, they form a kind of living metaphor for the entire philosophy of the amazing world of Gumball. That life doesn't make sense, but love gives it shape. Penny's light doesn't erase Gumball's chaos. It reflects it back to him in a gentler form. She doesn't tame him. She translates him. Through her, Gumball learns that love isn't supposed to fix the world. It's supposed to make it worth enduring. And maybe that's why their story resonates so deeply. It's not about destiny or perfection. It's about recognition. Two beings endlessly transforming, recognizing the same spark in each other again and again, no matter how much they change. So when Gumball looks at Penny, he isn't just looking at someone he loves. He's looking at the proof that the world, no matter how absurd, can still hold meaning. That change doesn't erase connection. It deepens it. And that maybe the truest kind of love isn't the one that lasts forever, but the one that grows with you, shifting form just like Penny's, but never losing its light. Every story about Gumball Watterson is, in some way, a story about imbalance between chaos and control, ignorance and awareness, childhood and adulthood. And if Gumball stands at the center of that storm, Aeneas Watterson watches it from the eye. The youngest member of the family, the smallest in stature, and yet the oldest in spirit, Anais is both the brain and the conscience of the Wattersons. She's the quiet intelligence that tries to hold together a world that refuses logic. In a household where laughter drowns out reason, she is reason personified. Brilliant, analytical, endlessly frustrated. But a gift, like all gifts in Elmore, is also a curse. Because Aeneas Watterson doesn't just understand the world, she sees it too clearly. And in a place built on nonsense, seeing too clearly can hurt. Aeneas's intelligence is a running joke in the series. But the more you watch, the more it becomes something else. A study in isolation. She's the smartest person in Elmore, perhaps the only one who realizes how absurd everything truly is. While Gumball and Darwin drift from one disaster to the next, Anais watches patterns emerge. She recognizes the futility of their routines, the circular logic of their lessons, the way their world resets after every episode. It's a kind of meta-awareness, the intellectual counterpart to Gumball's emotional self-consciousness. And though she's often portrayed as the voice of reason, there's an undertone of melancholy in her composure. Intelligence in Elmore doesn't bring clarity, it brings loneliness. From her earliest appearances, Aeneas seems less like a child and more like a displaced adult. Her sentences are precise, her observations cutting, her patience thin. She moves through chaos like someone perpetually exhausted by the need to explain everything twice. Yet, for all her brilliance, she's still just a little girl trying to belong to a family that doesn't share her wavelength. Nicole's expectations, Richard's passivity, Gumball's absurdity, Darwin's softness, all of them orbit her intellect, but rarely understand it. Anais loves them deeply, but she also feels the distance. And that tension between love and alienation defines her philosophy. To know is to be apart. It's easy to miss how tender Anais actually is beneath the surface of sarcasm. Her intelligence isn't pride, it's protection. She learned early that being the smartest person in the room doesn't make you powerful. It makes you responsible. When Gumball breaks something, she fixes it. When Richard forgets something, she remembers. When Nicole loses patience, she mediates. Anais has become the quiet engineer of the family's survival. The one who keeps the gears turning while everyone else plays. But responsibility is heavy for someone so small. She carries the burden of competence the way other children carry toys, close to the chest, always visible, always ready to be used. Gam, the pest, the roots, and the fury. We see glimpses of what this burden does to her. Anais doesn't just crave understanding, she craves recognition. She wants her family to see that being capable doesn't mean being invulnerable. When they laugh off her warnings or ignore her advice, she retreats into frustration, muttering under her breath, rolling her eyes. Small rebellions against being taken for granted. She knows she's right most of the time, but being right doesn't bring her joy. It isolates her. And in Elmore, isolation is its own kind of madness. Her relationship with Gumball reflects this paradox most clearly. On the surface, he drives her insane, careless, loud, irrational, constantly undoing her attempts at order. But beneath the bickering lies a deeper bond. Gumball represents everything Anais secretly envies. The ability to be wrong without consequence, to act before thinking, to find joy in confusion. His chaos frustrates her, but it also fascinates her. Because despite all her knowledge, she doesn't know how to let go. She studies him the way a scientist studies a phenomenon she doesn't understand. Equal parts irritated and in awe. In her eyes, Gumball's laughter is a kind of freedom she's never been able to access. And for Gumball, Anais is the quiet truth he can't ignore. Her presence reminds him that intelligence and empathy can coexist. That being smart doesn't mean being cold. She calls him out, holds him accountable, forces him to look at himself when he wants to deflect with jokes. Their sibling relationship, though often comedic, carries emotional weight. They represent the two halves of consciousness, the thinker and the feeler, reason and instinct. Where Gumball interprets the world through emotion, Anais interprets it through pattern. They fight constantly, but they also complete each other. When he overreacts, she grounds him. When she overanalyzes, he teaches her to laugh. Together they form a kind of cognitive balance. Intellect tempered by heart, heart guided by intellect. But Anais's brilliance also alienates her from childhood itself. While Gumball and Darwin chase games and mischief, Anais spends her time analysing them. She's a child living in a mind too adult to rest. Her awareness makes her responsible before she's ready, forcing her to play the role of caretaker in a family that barely notices she's still growing up. In the kids, we see this clearly. The way she's forced into the adult role when chaos overwhelms the house. She doesn't complain, but the exhaustion is visible. Anais carries the invisible weight of being the one who knows better. And that weight, over time, becomes part of her identity. It's not that she doesn't want to have fun. She does. It's that she doesn't know how to without feeling guilty about it. Knowledge, for her, has become a kind of prison. She can't turn it off. Every absurd moment in Elmore is another unsolvable equation. Every family argument a problem to decode. She's the one person who sees how fragile their world really is, how easily it breaks, how arbitrary its rules are. In a strange way, she's the show's hidden existentialist. Where Gumball finds a meaning through laughter, Anais questions if meaning exists at all. Her calm isn't serenity, it's fatigue. She knows too much to be fully happy, but she's too young to be fully resigned. Still, Anais's mind isn't just a tool for survival, it's a gift for compassion. She may not express emotion like the others, but she feels deeply. Her logic often hides a fierce protectiveness. When her family is in danger, she doesn't panic, she calculates. Her love expresses itself through problem solving, through the quiet competence of someone who would rather act than speak. She doesn't say, "I love you" often, but every solution she finds, every disaster she quietly prevents, carries that meaning. Her intelligence becomes her way of caring. An intellect in service of love, not superiority. Over time, you can see small cracks forming in her precision. She starts to laugh more, to let mistakes happen. She begins to realize that imperfection doesn't always need to be corrected. That's the lesson Gumball gives her in return. Where she teaches him structure, he teaches her surrender. Their dynamic, constantly in tension, becomes the heart of the Watterson family's balance. Without her, they'd fall apart. Without them, she'd calcify into logic. In their dysfunction, they somehow keep each other alive. There's a particular sadness in watching Anais try to reconcile intellect with play. In one episode, she builds an elaborate plan to help the family, and watches it fail spectacularly. Everyone laughs, and for a split second she laughs too. Not because it's funny, but because she understands that even perfect plans can't account for human nature. That's a quiet epiphany. Knowledge can't protect you from chaos, but love can make chaos bearable. From then on, her intelligence softens. She still calculates, still corrects, but she stops trying to fix the unfixable. She learns to live inside imperfection without losing clarity. In that sense, Anais becomes a bridge between her parents. From Nicole, she inherits determination. From Richard, she inherits gentleness. She combines both into something entirely her own, a kind of wisdom that doesn't demand control, but seeks understanding. She doesn't mock her family for their flaws anymore. She studies them with affection. She begins to see that Gumball's recklessness, Darwin's innocence, Nicole's drive, and Richard's apathy all come from the same place: fear of losing love. And once she understands that, her frustration turns into empathy. Her mind remains sharp, but her heart finally opens. In the later seasons, you can see this transformation in subtle ways. Anais smiles more often. She plays games without needing to win. She starts using her intelligence not just to solve problems, but to nurture connections. Her genius becomes less about knowing and more about understanding. That's the final stage of her growth. Realizing that wisdom without warmth is just noise. She learns that logic, when tempered by love, becomes compassion. And compassion, for someone like her, is the only kind of knowledge worth having. Anaïs's story is smaller than Gumball's, quieter, but it carries a profound message. Intelligence can light the way, but it can also blind you if you stare too hard. Awareness can save you, but it can also isolate you. The trick, as she learns, is to look without losing wonder, to keep your curiosity gentle. By the end of her journey, Anais hasn't become less smart. She's become kinder. And that's what makes her so essential to Elmore's strange ecosystem. She's the proof that knowledge doesn't have to erase innocence. It can deepen it. So when you picture Anais Watterson, the small girl with the big mind, sitting at the edge of another family disaster, sighing as the world falls apart again, don't just see a genius trapped in nonsense. See a child learning how to balance clarity with compassion. See someone learning that being the smartest person in the room doesn't mean you have to be the loneliest. See her learning, slowly, beautifully, to let herself laugh. Because even in a world where nothing adds up, Anais is beginning to realize that not everything needs to. Some things are meant to be felt, not solved. In Elmore, where physics crumble and logic is an afterthought, one truth manages to hold everything together: friendship. Not the kind found in textbooks or tidy moral lessons, but the messy, loyal, forgiving kind that grows in the cracks between disasters. The amazing world of Gumball is, at its heart, a story about connection, about how people collide, misunderstand, and still choose to stay. For Gumball Watterson, friendship isn't a side story. It's the structure of his world, the thread that binds his endless mistakes into something meaningful. Every failure, every joke, every moment of chaos exists within that web of relationships. Without it, he wouldn't just be lost. He wouldn't exist. Friendship in Elmore defies the neat rules of ordinary life. It's unpredictable, contradictory, and often chaotic. Gumball fights with his friends as much as he loves them. He mocks, teases, apologizes, forgets, remembers, and repeats the cycle endlessly. But beneath all the noise, there's a deep consistency to his relationships. A kind of emotional gravity that keeps pulling people back together no matter how far they drift. Maybe that's what makes the friendships in Gumball feel so real. They aren't perfect. They're built on forgiveness, not harmony. The show's entire emotional rhythm depends on that truth. Gumball, Darwin, Penny, Carrie, Tobias, Banana Joe, Alan, all of them orbit around each other, bumping and clashing like planets that somehow never fall apart. Each friend represents a different piece of Gumball's humanity. Darwin, his empathy; Penny, his vulnerability; Carrie, his melancholy; Tobias, his competitiveness; and Alan, his conscience. They each mirror a part of him that he doesn't fully understand. Through them, he learns, slowly, painfully, hilariously, that friendship isn't about similarity. It's about resonance. At the center of it all is Darwin. Their bond is something deeper than companionship. It's family, yes, but also philosophy. Gumball and Darwin are two halves of the same soul. One impulsive, one reflective, one laughter, one love. Their friendship transcends plot, logic, and even language. It's not built on agreement, but on faith. The faith that no matter how bad things get, they'll find their way back to each other. Every time Gumball pushes too far, Darwin forgives. Every time Darwin falters, Gumball protects him. It's not symmetrical, but it's balanced in its own strange way. They're brothers by bond, and that bond carries the same weight as belief. But friendship in Elmore extends far beyond the Watterson household. There's Penny, who teaches Gumball that love and friendship aren't separate. They're stages of the same truth. There's Carrie, who teaches him that even ghosts, literal or emotional, need company. And there's the strange constellation of classmates whose quirks make the world richer. Banana Joe's absurd humor, Tobias's competitiveness, Boba's mechanical sincerity, and Alan's endless optimism. Each of them, in their own bizarre way, reveals something about what it means to be connected. Because in a world where everyone is literally made of something different, glass, food, fur, air, pixels, friendship is the one force that transcends form. In the friendship, Gumball's relationship with Alan collapses under jealousy and misunderstanding. It's one of the show's most revealing episodes. Alan, the floating balloon of pure kindness, represents idealism, the belief that love alone can fix everything. Gumball, insecure and cynical, resents him for it. Their conflict exposes a deeper truth, that friendship isn't always easy between opposites. Kindness can feel condescending, sincerity can feel false when you're used to chaos. Yet by the end, they reconcile. Not because they agree, but because they understand. That's the heart of Gumball's philosophy. That connection doesn't erase difference, it embraces it. Every friend Gumball has teaches him something about himself. From Tobias, he learns humility. From Carrie, he learns empathy for sadness he can't fix. From Banana Joe, he learns that absurdity can be its own kind of truth. From Bobo, he learns that logic without feeling is empty. Friendship, for Gumball, becomes a classroom more real than school. A place where mistakes are the curriculum and forgiveness is the final exam. And though he fails constantly, he keeps showing up. That's what makes him lovable. He doesn't always understand people, but he never stops trying to. What makes the amazing world of Gumball so quietly radical is how it treats friendship as something sacred. The world ends, the rules reset, the animation shifts, but relationships endure. The characters forget lessons, but they never forget each other. Even when the universe itself glitches, as in the disaster or the void, the one thing that brings order back is connection. Gumball doesn't rebuild reality with science or strength. He rebuilds it with love. In Elmore, friendship isn't decoration, it's infrastructure. It's what holds the absurd world together. Gumball's approach to friendship is clumsy but sincere. He messes up constantly, lies, brags, competes, manipulates, but every failure becomes another chance to grow. His heart, though reckless, is huge. He doesn't love quietly. He loves loudly, disastrously, all at once. He's the kind of friend who will ruin your day just to fix it better later. That's his way of saying he cares. Through chaos, through apology, through persistence. And while his friends may roll their eyes, they never stop showing up for him either. Because they know that under all the noise, his loyalty is unbreakable. One of the show's most beautiful lessons is that friendship doesn't need permanence to matter. Elmore's world constantly resets, episodes loop, continuity bends, but the emotional continuity never disappears. No matter what changes, the friendships remain familiar. That repetition isn't laziness, it's philosophy. It reflects the way real relationships work, through cycles of conflict and reconciliation, misunderstanding and rediscovery. Gumball and his friends keep learning the same lessons because that's how friendship actually functions. It's not about never breaking, it's about always repairing. Carrie's relationship with Gumball adds another layer to this idea. As a ghost, she's both part of the world and apart from it, a metaphor for emotional distance. Her friendship with Gumball thrives on contrast. She's quiet where he's loud, introspective where he's impulsive. Through her, Gumball learns to sit with sadness instead of running from it. She teaches him that friendship isn't just about laughter, it's about presence. Sometimes, the most important thing you can do for someone is simply exist beside them in their loneliness. Carrie's spectral calm balances Gumball's frantic energy. Together they reveal how companionship can turn even emptiness into something living. In the misunderstandings, the idea of friendship becomes literal chaos. Secrets, lies, and ego unraveling everything at once. It's one of those episodes where Elmore's absurdity mirrors real life with eerie accuracy. Everyone wants to be heard, but no one wants to listen. By the end, as everything falls apart, Gumball learns what might be his most important lesson. Friendship can't survive pride. It demands vulnerability, the willingness to admit fault, to say sorry, to care even when it's embarrassing. That's the quiet heroism of Gumball Watterson. Not his humor, not his courage, but his ability to keep choosing connection over ego. What's remarkable about friendship in Gumball is how it reflects emotional truth without sentimentality. The show never sugarcoats relationships. Friends fight, hurt each other, betray each other, and yet they keep coming back. There's no grand speech or perfect resolution, just a mutual decision to try again. It's forgiveness without fanfare, love without condition. The philosophy behind it feels almost Buddhist. Impermanence is inevitable, but compassion gives it meaning. Gumball's friendships survive not because they're unbreakable, but because they're renewable. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that Elmore itself is a metaphor for community. Every character, no matter how absurd, contributes to the collective rhythm of the town. They're all part of the same strange organism, a reflection of how interconnected everything truly is. Gumball, in his own chaotic way, acts as the nervous system of that organism. His energy, his curiosity, his endless need to connect and understand keeps Elmore alive. Without him, the town might still exist, but it wouldn't feel like a world. He's the glue between everyone's stories. Perhaps the most profound statement the show makes about friendship is that it's stronger than logic. It can't be explained, categorized, or justified. It's irrational in the best possible way. Gumball's relationships don't make sense. They shouldn't, given the absurdity of the world, but they persist anyway. They survive the end of episodes, the collapse of timelines, even the rewriting of the universe itself. When the world forgets, friendship remembers. And that's the heart of Gumball's philosophy. That meaning is found not in reason, but in relation. It's why his world, for all its chaos, never feels hopeless. Because friendship gives even nonsense a pulse. Every time Gumball fails, someone's there to catch him. Every time someone else stumbles, he's there to lift them up. Sometimes badly, sometimes hilariously, but always sincerely. His world may bend, but his bonds don't. They stretch, they test, they reform, but they never truly break. So much of the amazing world of Gumball is about growing up. The awkward, painful, funny process of learning how to care for people while learning who you are. Gumball doesn't always get it right, but that's what makes his friendships feel so alive. They're not moral lessons, they're mirrors. They show us how connection looks when it's honest, not perfect, not tidy, but endlessly forgiving. By the end of it all, if there is an end, Gumball's world will probably collapse again. The screen might fade, the town might reset, the story might loop back to the beginning. But the friendships, those will linger even in memory. Because that's what friendship does. It outlasts endings. It exists not in the continuity of events, but in the persistence of feeling. That's the quiet truth of Gumball's world. The reason it keeps going, even when it shouldn't, is because connection keeps it alive. Friendship is the invisible force that glues together broken realities, the unspoken promise that no one is truly alone. And maybe that's why, no matter how strange Elmore becomes, it never loses its warmth. Because beneath the jokes, beneath the chaos, beneath all the surreal layers of existence, there's something beautifully human, keeping it all intact. The simple, stubborn, miraculous act of caring. Chaos is the first language of the amazing world of Gumball. It's the sound of doors slamming, screens glitching, physics bending, and people shouting all at once. It's the air Elmore breathes. From the very beginning, the show was built on disorder, its world stitched together from cardboard, CGI, 2D, clay, and 3D. A collage that shouldn't make sense, but somehow does. Chaos isn't the background of Gumball's story, it's the story itself. It's the condition he was born into, the current he keeps swimming against, the rhythm of his universe. And yet, beneath all the absurdity, chaos in Gumball isn't punishment. It's freedom. It's the unpredictable heartbeat that gives life meaning. For Gumball Watterson, chaos isn't an obstacle to be conquered. It's a companion. He doesn't just survive in disorder, he thrives in it. Every day in Elmore begins with something going wrong. A mistake, an accident, a misunderstanding. And every day, he transforms it into something new. He doesn't plan. He improvises. He doesn't calculate. He reacts. He is chaos, given form and voice and wit. And that's what makes him so strangely wise. Because in a world that refuses to obey rules, Gumball has learned the one truth that keeps him sane. If you can't predict life, you might as well play with it. The show itself mirrors that philosophy. Every episode begins with structure and ends in entropy. A single, small decision, missing the bus, forgetting homework, telling a lie, spirals into catastrophe. Buildings collapse, dimensions fold, logic implodes, but by the end, everything resets. Nothing truly breaks, it just rearranges itself. On the surface, this is comedy, but beneath it lies a deeper message. Chaos doesn't destroy the world, it renews it. It clears the board so something else can grow. That's the secret rhythm of Elmore. Destruction as renewal, laughter as resilience. In the choices, Nicole's life fractures into multiple timelines based on small decisions. In the disaster and the rerun, reality literally falls apart and rebuilds from Gumball's emotions. In the void, the universe eats its own mistakes. These aren't just gags, they're expressions of a worldview. Elmore is a living metaphor for impermanence, a reminder that everything, from matter to meaning, is temporary. The beauty of Gumball is that it turns that instability into warmth. Instead of despair, the show offers wonder. It tells us, yes, everything falls apart, but look how beautifully it does. Gumball's relationship with chaos is complicated. Sometimes he fights it, desperate to control the uncontrollable, and other times he embraces it too much. His failures come when he forgets the balance. In the plan, he tries to predict every possible outcome of a situation, only to watch it collapse under its own precision. In the limit, he pushes his mother until the world itself seems to break. And yet, through every disaster, Gumball learns the same quiet truth. Control is an illusion. You can't make life behave. The best you can do is dance with it. That's the difference between Gumball and his mother. Nicole sees chaos as something to be conquered. Gumball sees it as something to be understood. Where she builds walls against disorder, he dives headfirst into it. Where she sees threat, he sees possibility. His chaos isn't rebellion for its own sake, it's curiosity. It's the instinct to touch the fire, to test the boundary, to ask what if, over and over again. And though that instinct constantly gets him in trouble, it's also what makes him alive. Chaos in Gumball isn't random, it's emotional. The world reacts to feeling. Anger bends reality. Love changes colour palettes. Fear warps the environment. When Gumball feels too much, the show's art style literally distorts. It's not just surreal humour, it's symbolism. Elmore itself is conscious, reshaping around its characters' inner worlds. In that sense, The chaos isn't external at all. It's psychological. The absurdity we see is a reflection of emotion turned inside out. Gumball's world isn't crazy despite his feelings. It's crazy because of them. That emotional chaos gives the show its heart. Every absurd moment, the talking banana, the exploding school, the collapsing reality, mirrors a real feeling beneath it. The chaos is never meaningless. When Gumball turns selfish, the world punishes him with absurd coincidence. When he feels guilt, it manifests as a literal storm. When he learns compassion, color returns. The universe isn't cruel, it's responsive. It mirrors its people. That's what makes Elmore such a perfect metaphor for life itself. Unpredictable, unfair, and yet somehow intimate. As if everything strange that happens is just a reflection of our own hearts. There's a quiet philosophy buried in all that noise. The amazing world of Gumball treats chaos not as opposition to order, but as its companion. Every rule needs a flaw. Every system needs a crack. Without disorder, there's no growth. Elmore is absurd because it's alive. And Gumball, chaotic as he is, isn't fighting against meaning. He's building it out of accidents. He turns randomness into story. He gives nonsense a narrative. That's what art does. That's what humor does. That's what being human is. One of the most profound things about the show is how it balances chaos with compassion. No matter how wild things get, the emotional stakes stay grounded. A broken friendship, a misunderstanding, a family argument. Those are the real sources of entropy. The world explodes because someone's heart cracked. The disasters are metaphors for feelings too big to contain. When Gumball apologizes, reality heals. When the family reconciles, gravity resets. It's a poetic inversion of the usual formula. The emotional resolution doesn't follow the chaos. It repairs it. In Elmore, peace isn't the absence of madness. It's the restoration of meaning. What's interesting is how Gumball refuses to moralize chaos. Other shows teach that disorder must be corrected. Gumball teaches that it must be understood. Sometimes the mess is the point. Sometimes it's what reminds people that they're alive. The Wattersons' house is constantly falling apart, their plans constantly derailing, but there's love in that repetition. Every disaster becomes a shared memory. Every mistake becomes a story. And slowly, Gumball learns to stop chasing perfection and start finding joy in the mess. There's an episode, The Choices, where multiple timelines unfold, different versions of Nicole's life depending on the choices she makes. Each one is chaotic in its own way, full of unexpected consequences. The message isn't that she made the right choice, but that chaos is unavoidable. Every path is unpredictable, every outcome unstable. The only thing that matters is love. That's the show's quiet revelation. You can't choose the perfect life, but you can choose the people who make the imperfection bearable. For Gumball, chaos becomes his teacher. It humbles him. Every time he tries to outsmart the universe, it reminds him that he's small, not insignificant, but small enough to be free. In the finale, when he confronts Rob, the show's closest thing to a villain, we realize that Rob's madness is simply order gone wrong. The desperate need to impose structure on a world that refuses it. Gumball wins not by overpowering him, but by accepting the absurd. His survival comes from surrender. That's his strength. The ability to laugh in the face of the unknown. In the broader mythology of Elmore, chaos isn't random. It's creative. It builds as it destroys. Every broken rule births a new possibility. The show's animation itself becomes a metaphor for this. Mixed media, live action, 2D, stop motion, 3D, all coexisting without hierarchy. No one medium dominates. Every texture has a place. It's disorder by design, and it's beautiful. The world doesn't need to match to make sense. It just needs to connect. Gumball learns, over time, to treat that chaos with reverence. What once frustrated him becomes his element. He begins to see that unpredictability is the universe's way of inviting him to participate. The randomness isn't cruelty, it's collaboration. Life doesn't happen to him, it happens with him. His laughter, his creativity, his impulsiveness. They're not reactions, but contributions. That's the quiet enlightenment at the core of his story. That chaos isn't the enemy of meaning. It's its birthplace. Even the show's humor reflects this idea. The jokes pile on each other, self-reference, break structure, and collapse the fourth wall. Yet they always land emotionally. The writers understand what philosophers have been saying for centuries. That absurdity is not the opposite of truth, but its disguise. The ridiculousness of Elmore isn't meant to hide wisdom. It delivers it sideways. Through laughter, we're reminded that meaning doesn't have to be solemn to be real. Gumball's chaos becomes philosophy disguised as slapstick. And then there's the silence that follows. Every episode, no matter how wild, ends with quiet. The family sits together, the screen fades, the noise dissolves. It's a pattern, destruction followed by calm. It's as if the universe itself exhales. The show teaches us that chaos isn't endless. It moves in waves. It rises, it crashes, and then it rests. And that rest, those still moments between laughter, is where we find reflection. It's where we understand that disorder doesn't erase peace. It just makes it visible. There's a strange beauty in how Gumball treats the apocalypse as comedy. In the disaster, the universe literally collapses because Gumball refuses to let go. His emotions undo reality. And yet, instead of tragedy, we get renewal. It's funny, yes, but also deeply moving. Because it suggests that even at the end of the world, connection endures. That's the ultimate expression of the show's philosophy of chaos. Even when everything falls apart, love rebuilds it. Chaos in Elmore isn't something to fear. It's the proof that the world is alive. Every random event, every glitch, every inexplicable phenomenon. It's the heartbeat of existence, reminding its characters that stability is temporary, but joy can persist through change. Gumball doesn't conquer chaos. He becomes fluent in it. He learns its rhythm, its humor, its generosity, and by the end of his story, he understands what the adults in his life never could. That order is overrated. That the universe doesn't need to be tidy to be kind. When you look at Gumball sitting in his chaotic living room, the walls cracked, the furniture askew, the family shouting in the background, you start to see it differently. It's not dysfunction. It's life in motion. Every mess is a moment that could only exist once. Every argument is a sign of passion. Every absurd event, from the cosmic to the domestic, is a reminder that meaning isn't found in control, but in participation. The Wattersons aren't surviving chaos, they're celebrating it. And maybe that's what the amazing world of Gumball has been saying all along. That life doesn't become beautiful when it's orderly. It becomes beautiful when it's alive. When it changes, when it breaks and mends and breaks again. Chaos is not the villain of the story. It's the proof that there is a story. Because if everything were predictable, there would be nothing left to learn, no reason to laugh, no moment worth remembering. Gumball Watterson's greatest wisdom is simple. He accepts the absurd and calls it home. He finds comfort in the unpredictable. He learns that chaos, at its core, is just another word for possibility. And once you see it that way, The noise stops being frightening. It becomes music. Meaning is a strange thing in Elmore. It hides in the cracks between laughter and disaster, flickers in the moments between one punchline and the next. The world of the amazing world of Gumball is not built to make sense. It's built to be alive. Everything in it, its colors, its characters, its chaos, exists in motion. Nothing stays the same long enough to be defined, and yet, somehow, through that constant movement, meaning emerges. It's not stable, not certain, not logical. It's emotional. It's relational. It's the small, warm truth that keeps Gumball Watterson's world from dissolving completely. That the point of existence isn't to understand it, but to live it. Gumball's life begins and ends in absurdity. He wakes up to chaos, goes to school in a town that obeys no rules, and falls asleep in a home where reality itself bends nightly. The laws of the universe around him are inconsistent, but the feelings inside him are not. That's the first hint of the show's deeper truth. Meaning doesn't come from structure, it comes from sincerity. The world may break, but love doesn't. Humor doesn't. Curiosity doesn't. Those things persist even when logic fails. In that sense, Gumball's laughter isn't just a reaction, it's resistance. It's how he declares that nonsense doesn't mean nothing. The series never offers a clear answer to what life in Elmore means. It can't. To define it would destroy it. Instead, Gumball teaches through contradiction. Every episode resets, yet the characters grow. Every lesson is forgotten, yet somehow remembered emotionally. The show loops without losing momentum, like a record skipping on purpose. That rhythm, the endless return, isn't futility, it's philosophy. It reflects how we actually live, repeating mistakes until understanding quietly settles in, not as knowledge, but as peace. In that sense, meaning in Gumball isn't intellectual, it's experiential. It's what happens when emotion and absurdity meet halfway. When Gumball laughs at disaster, when Nicole softens after anger, when Darwin forgives, when Richard hugs without reason, those are the real revelations. The show's wisdom hides in moments that look ridiculous. In spilled cereal, broken toys, cosmic glitches. Meaning doesn't descend from above, it bubbles up through play. The world of Elmore may be a joke, but it's a joke that loves you. Gumball's search for meaning is the show's quiet through line. Beneath every laugh, he's always asking the same question. Why am I here? Sometimes he tries to answer it through action, becoming a hero, a genius, a romantic, a rebel, but none of those identities ever hold. They collapse, leaving him confused and newly aware. Each failure strips away another illusion until what's left is simple: connection. Gumball finds meaning not in what he accomplishes, but in who he shares the world with. His existence matters because it touches others. His story continues because he keeps caring. There's a kind of paradox in that simplicity. Gumball is a character born from chaos, animated nonsense, drawn jokes, surreal elasticity, and yet he feels more real than many heroes built from seriousness. Maybe that's because his meaning doesn't come from narrative resolution. It comes from continuity of feeling. Even when the world resets, even when episodes contradict each other, the emotions stay true. Love, embarrassment, friendship, jealousy, forgiveness, these remain constant. The form changes, but the heart does not. That's how Gumball defines meaning. Not as something found, but as something felt, again and again, in different disguises. In the finale, Gumball faces a kind of cosmic reckoning. The show becomes aware of itself. Characters realize they're in a world that might end. It's metafictional, yes, but also strangely spiritual. Gumball confronts the possibility that nothing he's done matters because none of it is real, and yet, in the middle of that existential panic, he still chooses to care. He still fights for his friends, still laughs, still refuses to let meaning dissolve just because logic does. That's the show's greatest argument. That meaning isn't inherent, it's created. It's a choice, renewed daily, in defiance of absurdity. That's what makes the amazing world of Gumball so quietly profound. It's not about teaching lessons or solving problems. It's about showing that meaning doesn't need permanence. It can exist in a single frame, a single joke, a single act of kindness. When Darwin comforts Gumball, when Penny smiles, when Nicole apologizes, those are moments of transcendence. Tiny, fleeting, but enough. The meaning of life in Elmore isn't to escape chaos, it's to feel deeply within it. The town itself is an ecosystem of meaning through difference. Every inhabitant, Tina the T-Rex, Banana Joe, Bobbert, Carrie, Tobias, Alan, represents a different mode of being. They clash constantly, but that's what makes the world whole. Elmore isn't meant to be logical, it's meant to be inclusive. It's what happens when everything that shouldn't coexist somehow does. The meaning comes from coexistence itself, from the fact that everything belongs, no matter how strange. That's not chaos. That's harmony in disguise. Meaning also lives in Elmore's humor. The jokes, the cutaways, the self-references, they aren't just style. They're how the show meditates on awareness. Every time the fourth wall breaks, the series is reminding us that we too are part of the joke. That life itself is absurd, and yet we keep taking it seriously. Laughter becomes the bridge between awareness and acceptance. It's how we hold contradiction without breaking. When Gumball laughs at the absurdity of his life, he's not mocking it. He's forgiving it. He's saying, this doesn't make sense, but that's okay. That's enlightenment disguised as comedy. The show's refusal to end properly is its final statement. The finale teases apocalypse, resolution, closure, but doesn't deliver any of it. The screen cuts, the music swells, and the world keeps spinning. That's not narrative laziness. That's honesty. Life doesn't end with answers. It continues with questions. And in that continuation lies grace. Elmore never resolves because it doesn't need to. It's not about arrival. It's about movement. About the endless act of becoming. Gumball's philosophy of meaning is therefore inseparable from his personality. His impulsiveness, his curiosity, his contradictions, all of it forms a worldview built on experimentation. He doesn't wait for meaning to reveal itself. He creates it through living. Every disaster he causes becomes an opportunity for understanding. Every joke he tells becomes a small rebellion against despair. He's proof that even imperfection can be sacred, if it's honest. Nicole seeks meaning through control. Richard seeks it through pleasure. Darwin finds it through kindness. Aeneas through understanding. Penny through transformation. And Gumball, the boy who connects them all, finds it through chaos. Each of them represents a different approach to existence, and together they form something complete. That's the hidden symmetry of the show. The illusion of randomness concealing balance. Meaning, in Gumball, is relational, a web of opposites finding home in each other. Even the structure of the series, its blend of styles, genres, and tones, embodies that philosophy. One moment heartfelt, the next surreal, one moment absurd, the next devastatingly sincere. It's tonal chaos as emotional truth. Life feels that way too. 1 second trivial, the next profound. The show's willingness to swing between laughter and sadness without warning is what makes it real. Meaning isn't consistent emotion, it's emotional honesty. It's the courage to admit that life can be ridiculous and beautiful at the same time. There's something profoundly tender about how the show treats impermanence. Every episode ends, every joke fades, every problem resets, but the emotional residue remains. You don't remember each story for its plot. You remember how it made you feel. That's the show's quiet magic. It teaches us to value transience instead of fearing it. Gumball doesn't try to preserve moments. He burns through them, bright and brief, knowing that their impermanence is what makes them precious. Meaning, in the end, is just attention. It's noticing. And Gumball notices everything. The absurd, the tragic, the miraculous. He reacts to it with awe disguised as sarcasm, wonder disguised as mockery. His humor isn't cynicism, it's reverence wearing armor. Because to laugh at life's absurdity is to admit that you care about it enough to find it funny. That's what separates him from the true nihilism of characters like Rob or The Void. They see the world's nonsense and despair. Gumball sees it and laughs. Not because it's meaningless, but because it's alive. In one of the show's final meta moments, Gumball looks directly at the audience, confused but calm, and says something simple. What just happened? It's both a joke and a thesis. The point isn't to answer, it's to share the bewilderment. Meaning doesn't need clarity, it just needs company. Life is strange, so we face it together, laughing through the uncertainty. That's the core of the amazing world of Gumball. Community as comprehension. When you strip away the animation, the meta jokes, the absurd humor, what remains is profoundly human. It's a story about a boy who wants to understand a world that refuses to explain itself, and who eventually realizes that the lack of explanation is the beauty. That everything fleeting, everything unpredictable, everything strange, these are not flaws in the system. They're the texture of existence itself. So what is the philosophy of Gumball Watterson? It's the acceptance of the unexplainable. It's laughter in the face of confusion. It's the courage to keep loving a world that makes no sense. Meaning isn't hidden behind the chaos, it is the chaos, transformed by care. Gumball's story is proof that absurdity and grace can coexist. That we can live inside the mess and still call it home. In the final quiet of his world, when the screen dims and the sound fades, you can almost imagine him sitting on the couch, watching the sunset glitch across the sky. He looks tired, but content. Around him, his family laughs about something meaningless. The walls tremble. The TV hums. Nothing is certain, but everything feels complete. Gumball smiles, not because he's found the answer, but because he's learned that the question is enough. And that's the last lesson of Elmore, that life doesn't need to be explained to be loved. The world is ridiculous, fragile, temporary, and that's exactly why it matters. Meaning isn't the opposite of nonsense, it's what we build together inside it. And now, as the noise fades, as Elmore softens into twilight and the laughter becomes a hum beneath the stars, we come to rest beside Gumball Watterson, the boy who laughed his way through meaning. The world around him still flickers, still bends, still refuses to settle into sense. But for once, he doesn't mind. The questions that used to keep him awake, why am I here? What does it all mean? How do I make it stop spinning? No longer feel heavy. They just float, gentle and distant, like paper boats on an endless current. Because maybe that's the secret. Maybe life isn't supposed to make sense. Maybe it's just supposed to be felt. The small absurdities, the impossible coincidences, the laughter that spills out even when everything is going wrong, Those are the real answers. The Wattersons, for all their chaos, have found something sacred in imperfection. Nicole's discipline, Richard's carelessness, Ananias's intellect, Darwin's heart, Penny's change, Gumball's chaos, all of it coexists, collides, forgives, begins again. Somehow, through every mistake and miracle, they keep finding each other. If you listen closely, you can still hear it. The quiet rhythm that holds their world together. Not the ticking of a clock or the hum of a machine, but the pulse of connection. Every joke, every shout, every argument is just another way of saying, I'm here. That's what meaning really is. Not certainty, not control, but presence. To live inside the noise and still choose to care. Gumball never finds the great cosmic secret. He doesn't solve the puzzle of existence or fix the fractures of reality. But he learns something gentler, something wiser. That life, no matter how strange, is still worth laughing with. That chaos, no matter how loud, can still be kind. That every mistake, no matter how small, is just another shape of love trying to express itself. So tonight, as the colours of Elmore fade into the quiet glow of the screen, let yourself drift with him. Let the nonsense make sense for once. Let the laughter slow down until it becomes breathing. The world may never stop changing, but that's not something to fear. It's something to rest inside. Because at the end of every day, after the disasters, after the noise, after the questions, there's always a moment like this. The couch, the family, the soft hum of a cartoon that somehow feels like home. And in that stillness, meaning doesn't need to be found. It's already here. In the warmth, in the absurdity, in the simple fact that we're still here together. Still laughing. Still learning. Still alive. Sleep well, traveller of Elmore. Tomorrow, the world will break again. And you'll laugh again. And that will be enough.